Every business has a logo, and when it's yours, it matters. GPS is a 30-year local Las Vegas company that produces custom merch, like hats and apparel, drinkware and totes, blankets and bandanas, really any kind of swag you can imagine that features your logo or message. They're experts at finding or creating the right products for the season and the reason that fit your budget and timeline. Check out the GPS website at gpslasvegas.com, where there's a world of products to promote your brand.
The election is done. It is donezo. It was the gift that kept on taking, our patience anyway, but now it's time to put a bow on it. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, we talk with Nevada's point man for politics on all the big journalistic discourse, Jon Ralston, CEO of the Nevada Independent, about what's next as the players are in place and the citizens are ready to move forward. Oh, and how bad he messed up predicting Kamala Harris was going to win Nevada. It's Tuesday, November 12th. I'm Dayvid Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Jon, I will say it was your voting blog updates and the stories on the Nevada Independent that were my lodestar for my prediction that Trump was going to win Nevada handedly. Trump seemed invincible. Did you see any cracks that may have swayed you to basically royally screw up that prediction?
Thanks for that, David. Always a pleasure to be on when I'm introduced this way.
Well, you did get 5 out of 6 of the federal offices right. So kudos to you. But what happened here, man?
So, listen, I think the Republicans were very excited by reading my early voting blog and seeing that the Republicans were building an early lead, which is highly unusual. As you know, usually it's the Democrats banking votes. Now, things have changed a little bit because of how we've become such a heavily male state. But basically, in talking to people on both sides and knowing what the Democrats are capable of doing with mail ballots, I did some math and I thought that they would be able to just squeak it out. Now, of course, I was out on a limb. It looked like the data was indicating, as you mentioned, that Trump was going to win the state. But I guess what I really messed up, because I had it right that he was going to be about even in Washoe County. That's what happened, that he was going to win the rural counties by about 70,000 votes, probably what it's going to end up being. But Clark County was the huge surprise. And that's where the real interesting stuff in this election happened, David, because Donald Trump is only going to end up losing Clark County by about 3 points, I think. And Biden won Clark County by 9. And in the other 4 that they've won in a row, the first 3, 2008, 2012, and 2016, they were all double digits.
Yeah, it's a big swing.
You expected the Democrats to win by more than 3 points. And if they had won by 4 points or 5 points, we'd be having a very different discussion now. And I would be feted all over Las Vegas and America and the world for my genius. Instead, I'm being pilloried by the likes of you. But seriously, there's something going on in Clark County. It's changed, David. And what it is exactly, I think we all need to figure out.
I am curious, though, what you think moving ahead, the most immediate impact of a Trump presidency will have on Las Vegas.
It's hard to tell, right? Because it's true of any candidate that you don't know which of their promises they're going to keep and which that were just made for campaign purposes. And Trump could be the most unpredictable of all. If he decides to go through with his mass deportation plan, which is, as you know, not that easy to implement, but you could start doing some things, it's going to have a huge effect here. As you know, we have a lot of undocumented workers in Nevada. And how are they going to do that? How does that affect the Nevada economy? I think that is really going to be kind of scary to watch. But as far as other things that he does, how the economy in general is affected by what Trump does is going to have an effect on Nevada. You know that, if people feel good and start coming here, maybe it'll help the economy. But if the economy starts to go south under Trump, that's going to hurt Nevada.
Interesting. Do you think any locals might get elevated into the Trump administration?
It's possible. If you consider Sam Brown a local, he is being floated by some people close to Trump, including Ben Shapiro and Bill Ackman, the billionaire, as a veterans secretary. That seems a little bit far-fetched to me, but You just never know what might happen. It's possible that Michael McDonald, the state Republican Party chairman, could get a job with the administration because of his loyalty to Trump. And there may be others as well. But the Sam Brown thing is the most interesting to me. I'm not sure that's going to happen.
In the 2016 presidential election, we had almost a 78% turnout. In 2020, around the same, about 77. This year, it looks like if we're lucky, we're going to hit 71. Why do you think that number is dropping?
I think there's a pretty simple explanation for that, and that is what I've been talking about with this explosion of nonpartisan voters because of the automatic voter registration, where if you go to the DMV and you don't choose a party, you're automatically registered as a nonpartisan. I've said that there's tens of thousands probably of zombie voters, meaning people who are registered without their knowledge, don't really care about being part of the civic discourse or voting or anything, and they weren't going to vote. And so that, because it increases the numbers but not the participation, that's why it's lower. I don't think we will see at some point what the Democratic turnout was, what the Republican turnout was, and what the nonpartisan turnout was. But nonpartisan turnout is going to be significantly lower because of what I just told you about.
Well, Clark County, yeah, that does make sense because it does seem like it has some lower numbers, especially against the rurals who, golly, maybe more than 80% participation in the other counties that aren't Washoe or Clark.
That happens every cycle. And some of these rural counties get astonishingly high participation rates, high 80s in some of them. That's generally the smaller counties. But the rural Nevada turns out in greater percentage terms than the urban areas always. And Washoe almost always turns out in a greater percentage than Clark County.
You think there's a lesson there about why the rurals are so engaged that the urban parties might learn from to get their engagement higher?
I don't think so, David. The population is just so much smaller and so much more, I guess I'd use the word partisan and dedicated to voting for their person or against somebody, the way they used to come out against the late Senator Harry Reid. And they take their voting seriously there. What's different this cycle is that they front-loaded their vote, and because they were encouraged to vote early and by mail, more voting early than voting by mail, which, as you may remember, Republicans had discouraged in the past. And so that made sure that all of their votes were banked.
Yeah. One last question on the rurals. You sometimes see our senators, which are a statewide elected office, whether it's Cortez Masto or in this case, Rosen, really bringing home big projects to the rurals, like saving the bacon, saving the post office, et cetera. And yet it doesn't seem to have much of an impact on the voting. Is there anything that a Democrat senator can do for the rurals to win them back?
It's a great question, David, and it's really what you just said is exactly right. And again, I'm going back to the late Harry Reid. He brought more projects and money to rural Nevada than anyone in history, and no one will ever come close to doing it again. And he was absolutely reviled in rural Nevada, and they, he stopped going to rural Nevada essentially in his last couple elections because they hated him so much. There were vulgar signs about him. He was essentially hung in effigy in some places, despite having saved some of these smaller communities with water projects and with other infrastructure kinds of projects. But they were very close-minded about him.
Let's dive in a little more locally. I want to talk about one position that flipped from Dem to Republican, and that's the Dallas Harris race. She lost to political but not societal newcomer Lori Rogich. What do the Dems or even the state Senate itself lose without a Dallas Harris in that seat?
Well, people have very mixed feelings about Dallas Harris. There are some who thought that she was someone who stood up for the working class and for the downtrodden. And there were others who thought she was singularly ineffective. But what they lose, it remains to be seen. The state Senate getting Lori Rogich will be a changed state Senate in the sense that they will not have a supermajority that the Democrats had hoped for. And Lori Rogich, remember, David, was endorsed by the Culinary Union, which is part of the ongoing kind of internecine fighting between the culinary and the state legislature, because the legislature would not enact into law a mandatory room cleaning bill, and they rejected the culinary's advocacy of a lottery. They tried to beat some incumbents in the primary. They did not succeed, and they tried again in the general, and they succeeded.
Do you think, John, that culinary really thinks that Lori Rogich is going to support union causes like the housekeeping requirement or even the lottery when so much gaming backed her as well?
I doubt it, David, but they wanted to make a point. And whether this is a cut off your nose to spite your face kind of move or not, we're going to find out. We have no idea what kind of legislator Lori Rogich is going to be, even though she's the wife of very famous political operative Sig Rogich. We just don't know what her views are, except that she wants to fix education. She and her husband sued the school district
successfully
over the treatment of their child. And she's very passionate about that issue. But what is she going to do on other issues? I think she's a moderate, but we have no idea until she gets there.
Well, generally speaking, the Dems are moderates in the legislature. I think you agree with that they're closer to the center than they are to the left, for sure, in Nevada, right?
Depends on the Democrat you're talking about.
And I'm talking about Dallas Harris, and she was probably the most, I would say, vocally progressive person in the Senate. I mean, it's arguable, but when you talk about police accountability and you talk about housing and you talk about some of these other very important progressive issues, like you said, for people who often don't have a voice, Dallas Harris seemed to be maybe theatrically, but out there as the sort of voice. And now that voice is gone. So is that signal even a further kind of shift to the center for the Dems?
Maybe. It's going to be interesting what kind of lessons are taken away from this. For instance, despite Trump winning at the top, as you mentioned, the Democrats were all reelected to their seats, Jackie Rosen and the House members. And the Republicans didn't do as well, I think, as they hoped, even though I think it's a victory for the Republican governor that there's no supermajority in the legislature. They didn't win about 5 or 6 seats that they thought they had a chance to win. And so what is the lesson that the Democrats take away? Oh, we didn't lose that much. We still have large majorities in both houses. Let's do business as usual. Or do they take what Bernie Sanders has said is the lesson of this election overall, which is Democrats have to choose between the working class and the elites? You know, the cynical view of the legislature is no matter what party you are, you're going to show some fealty to the moneyed interests, especially the gaming industry. Will that continue? And what is the culinary's role in all of that? Do they feel like they have gotten their revenge now and that's enough? Are they going to push for certain things again? I think it remains to be seen what the lesson is, because they were very, very ugly races between the Democrats in the legislature and the governor. And each side thought the other side went too far. And so how that is resolved, whether the Democrats need to move to the middle or stay where they were and on some issues, is going to be very interesting to watch.
Let's follow up on that lack of a supermajority. I mean, last session, some interesting bills, some progressive, some other were passed, but I have to think that they knew the governor was going to veto them, especially in the area of like housing. Is this session going to be more of that same sort of posturing? Or do they get there this time with the things that they say are most important to them?
It's a very good question, David. And again, this isn't a cop-out. I think it's way too early to tell. I will tell you that there are a lot of bad feelings between the governor and the leaders of the legislature in how they conducted themselves, more towards the assembly than towards the Senate. But still, I think Lombardo set a record for vetoes. I think it was 75, somewhere in that neighborhood. And a lot of them were housing bills that were supposedly very important to the Democrats. Now it looks like that was just performative. They knew that he was going to veto those bills. They wanted to use them in the elections. Didn't do them that much good, I don't think. The question is, are they going to do what they should do, in my opinion, which is someone should reach out and say, let's sit down and talk about where we can find common ground. Where do you draw the line, Governor, on what you will veto on housing policies? And where can you we can show you evidence of people being hurt, that this is a problem that's only going to escalate unless we do something, whatever something means. Will they actually work together? Is going to be a really interesting thing. Don't forget, David, that Lombardo is now entering his re-election cycle.
Yep.
So he has a needle to thread there as well. And so how that governs, so to speak, what he does is going to be very interesting to watch.
Well, speaking of, this last election and what we're doing moving forward, the Democratic leadership, Steve Yeager and Nicole Cannizzaro, both had pretty tough races. Do you think that there's any chance of a change in leadership to get that sort of harmony or compromise with the governor, or you think they're going to go with the same team?
Well, they shouldn't have had tough races, but their races were close because generally it was not a great election for the Democrats. And if it weren't for the Democratic machine harvesting all those mail ballots and getting them into drop boxes on election day, we'd be having a very, very different conversation. The majority leader of the assembly, Sandra Jauregui, almost lost. Her race is going to have been decided by a few hundred votes. Yeager and Cannizzaro ended up winning relatively decisively, but still much closer by against opponents who were not funded at all. So The question is, will there be insurrections in either house against them? I think there may be noises, but they won't be much more than murmurs, and I would guess that they'd both retain their leadership posts.
Any other races you think will change things in the upcoming year after this last election?
Well, we've talked about the major ones. There's not going to be huge changes in the legislature, right? I mean, the Democrats essentially stayed even in the state Senate because while Dallas Harris lost, they picked up an open seat. So they still have 13 seats there out of 21. And they only lost one off of their supermajority in the assembly. So that matrix is pretty much the same. So I still think there is a potential for gridlock and many vetoes by Lombardo, especially since he's up for re-election.
Let me ask it this way. Is there any other race in Southern Nevada that you think is going to result in a change of the way things are?
No, but okay. I will say that you have the first Republican on the county commission since Bruce Woodbury was there, and April Becker is filling Ross Miller's seat. And so what kind of commissioner will she be? I don't know. And of course, Shelley Berkeley becoming mayor for the first time, having a person not named Goodman in 25 years. And she still has Victoria Seaman, whom she beat on that council. That I'm not sure that's going to be such a great situation. Everyone wants to talk about Badlands, but that's only one of many issues that they have to confront. So I think the local government picture could be somewhat interesting to watch.
Yeah. Well, looking out at the landscape of the future, let me ask you this. Does Nevada still matter when it comes to the presidential races?
We didn't matter this year. And even though I've tried to make it seem like we matter every cycle, the truth is, even though the candidates come here because they can't afford not to, because we're one of the battleground states, Nevada has not mattered in any of the last four presidential elections. That is, it's been decided before all Nevada's votes were counted. And that's not just because we take forever to count votes. It's just that like, for instance, Biden didn't need Nevada to win. Trump didn't need Nevada to win in 2016, and Obama didn't need Nevada in the two races he won. So we matter in the sense that we're still a purple state, even though we're red now for the purposes of the presidential race. And so we will matter going forward, but we're a very different state, and Clark County, as I said, is a very different county than it has been in the past, not reliable for Democrats, and they should be worried about that.
Jon Ralston, really do appreciate all your insights. And man, you've got a great track record. Don't let the Kamala Harris prediction get you down. I was just ribbing you a little bit.
Well, which prediction was that?
Exactly. Jon Ralston, thanks for joining us today on CityCast Las Vegas.
Thank you, David.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? You could rate our show too, give us those stars that we love, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.
A dog has entered the room. And he's now making himself comfortable. Okay, Ace, sit down.